Let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about it like I'm sitting right next to you right now. If a woman comes to you and starts telling you her problems, what do you think that means? Because most men immediately jump to the wrong conclusion. Some guys think she trusts me, others think she wants advice. And a lot of men secretly think this must mean she likes me. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one tells you. When a woman tells you her problems, it does not automatically mean what you hope it means. And if you misunderstand it, you can destroy attraction without even realizing it. This is where many men lose ground, fast. Men are wired to fix, to solve, to jump in with logic, answers, and action steps. So when a woman opens up emotionally, men often go into repair mode. They listen just long enough to diagnose, then they start explaining what she should do. And that's usually a mistake. Because when a woman shares her problems, it's rarely about the problem itself. It's about how she feels in that moment, and more importantly, how you show up while she's sharing it. This is where things get controversial. Sometimes, her telling you her problems means she feels emotionally safe with you. Sometimes, it means she sees you as strong and grounded. But other times, and this is the part most men don't want to hear, it means she's placing you firmly in a non-romantic role. Yes, that role. And the difference between those outcomes has almost nothing to do with what she's saying, and everything to do with how you respond. This isn't about becoming cold. It's not about ignoring her. And it's definitely not about pretending to be someone you're not. It's about understanding the unspoken message behind her words and responding in a way that maintains respect, emotional strength, and attraction. If you've ever felt confused after a deep conversation with a woman, if you've ever listened, supported, and then wondered why things didn't move forward, or if you've been labeled such a good listener but nothing more, then this is a conversation you need to hear. Because when a woman tells you her problems, she's always communicating something deeper. And once you understand what that really means, you stop guessing and you start responding the right way. 1. It doesn't automatically mean she's interested in you. Let me stop you right here, because this is where most men get it wrong. If a woman tells you her problems, that does not automatically mean she's romantically interested in you. And I know that statement alone makes a lot of guys uncomfortable, because in your mind you're thinking, why would she open up like that if she didn't like me? Here's the truth most men never hear growing up. Women talk to process emotions. Men talk to solve problems. Those are two very different things. So when a woman starts telling you about her stress, her frustrations, or her emotional struggles, she's not sending a secret signal. She's not testing you to see if you'll make a move. Most of the time, she's simply expressing what's going on inside her. And if you assume interest too quickly, you risk misreading the situation completely. This is where the controversy comes in. A woman can trust you emotionally without being attracted to you romantically. She can feel safe talking to you without seeing you as a potential partner. And yes, she can open up deeply and still not want anything more. That doesn't mean you did something wrong, but it does mean you need to stop attaching fantasy to vulnerability. Many men confuse emotional access with romantic access. They think, she's letting me in, so I must be special. And while that may feel good, it can be dangerous if you build expectations around it. Because the moment you start acting entitled to more attention, more affection, more closeness, you change the dynamic. And not in a good way. Here's something most men don't want to hear. Women often share problems with men they feel comfortable around, not necessarily men they're attracted to. Comfort is neutral. Attraction is polarized. Comfort says, I can relax here. Attraction says, I feel pulled toward him. Those are not the same thing. If you immediately jump into emotional caretaker mode, listening endlessly, reassuring constantly, and sacrificing your own frame, you may unintentionally position yourself as the safe option. And while safety matters, attraction needs more than that. This is why some men do everything right and still hear, you're such a good guy, because being supportive alone doesn't create desire. Now, this doesn't mean you should shut her down or act cold. That's not strength. That's insecurity. Strength is being able to listen without attaching meaning that isn't there. When a woman tells you her problems, the smartest thing you can do is this: stay grounded, stay calm, stay neutral. Don't rush to interpret, don't rush to fix, and definitely don't rush to assume. Instead, observe how she treats you outside of those conversations. Does she invest in you? Does she show curiosity about your life? Does she create moments to connect beyond venting? Those signals matter far more than emotional disclosure alone. So remember this: her sharing problems is information, not confirmation. And the men who understand that don't get confused, desperate, or disappointed. They stay in control of themselves, and that alone already sets them apart. 2. Sometimes she wants understanding, not solutions. Let me say something that goes directly against how most men are wired, and I want you to hear this clearly. When a woman tells you her problems, she usually does not want you to fix them. I know, that sounds backwards, because as a man, the moment you hear a problem, your brain switches on. You start connecting dots, identifying mistakes, and thinking, okay, here's what you should do. That instinct makes sense. It's logical. It's efficient. And in this situation, it's often the wrong move. Here's the part that confuses men. A woman can already know the solution and still feel the need to talk about the problem. Why? Because talking isn't about reaching an answer. It's about releasing emotional pressure. Think of it like this. Men process internally and act externally. Women process externally to feel internally balanced. So when she's venting, she's not handing you a task, she's sharing a state. This is where many men accidentally sabotage themselves. They interrupt, they correct, they explain what she should have done differently. And without realizing it, they shift the conversation from understanding to judgment. Even if your advice is solid, even if you're right, it can make her feel unheard. And once a woman feels unheard, she emotionally pulls back. This is why you've probably experienced moments where you tried to help, only for her to get frustrated or quiet. You thought you were being useful. She felt like her emotions were being dismissed. Here's the controversial truth. Giving solutions too early can make you seem disconnected, not competent. Because emotional intelligence isn't about how fast you solve the problem. It's about how well you understand the experience. Now let's be very clear about something. This does not mean you become passive. It does not mean you nod silently like a therapist. And it definitely does not mean you lose your masculinity. It means you slow down. When she's talking, your job isn't to lead the conversation forward, it's to hold space. That might sound abstract, so let me make it simple. Holding space means you listen without interrupting. You acknowledge how she feels. You don't rush to make it logical. Sometimes all she needs to hear is, "That sounds frustrating," or "I get why that bothered you." Those statements don't solve anything, and that's exactly why they work. Because once a woman feels understood, her emotional intensity drops. And only after that happens does she become open to clarity, insight, or advice, if she even wants it. Here's something most men never realize. When you stay calm and grounded while she's emotional, you create contrast. You don't absorb the chaos. You don't react impulsively. You don't try to control the situation. And that calm presence is powerful. It signals confidence. It signals emotional strength. It signals that you're not overwhelmed by her emotions. Ironically, that's when she starts to value your input more. Because advice given too early feels dismissive. Advice given at the right moment feels respected. So remember this rule. Understanding comes before solutions, always. If you master that, you don't just communicate better, you stand out, and most men never do. 3. Why being too helpful can kill attraction. Let's talk about something most men never question, because it feels like the right thing to do. Being helpful, you listen, you show up, you make yourself available. On the surface, that sounds like maturity, like emotional strength, like you're doing everything a good man should do. But here's the uncomfortable reality. Being too helpful at the wrong time can quietly erase attraction. And the worst part? Most men don't even realize it's happening. If you've ever felt like you were always there for her, yet somehow she didn't see you the same way, you already know what this feels like. You didn't pressure her, you didn't disrespect her, you just kept giving. And slowly, the dynamic shifted. Here's why. When your default response to her problems is constant availability, constant reassurance, and constant emotional labor, you stop feeling like a grounded presence and start feeling like a resource. That's controversial to say, but it's real. Attraction isn't built on effort alone. It's built on self-respect, boundaries, and emotional balance. When you prioritize her emotions above your own stability, you unintentionally communicate that your world revolves around her moods. And that doesn't feel attractive. It feels predictable. Many men think, if I just show her how much I care, she'll see my value. But care without boundaries often turns into overinvestment. You start responding immediately. You're always available. You absorb her stress as if it's your responsibility. And over time, you lose your edge. This isn't about playing games or pulling away dramatically. It's about understanding that attraction requires polarity. There has to be a sense that you have your own life, your own priorities, and your own emotional center. When you're too helpful, you flatten that polarity. You become emotionally flexible to the point where there's no tension, no contrast. And here's the part that hits hardest for a lot of men. You can be appreciated without being desired. Appreciation sounds like compliments. Desire shows up in behavior. If she leans on you but never leans toward you, something is off. That doesn't mean you stop being supportive. It means you stop overextending. Real strength is knowing when to engage and when to stay centered. It's being present without losing yourself. It's helping without trying to earn something in return. Because the moment your help is tied to an unspoken expectation, attention, affection, validation, you're no longer grounded. You're negotiating. And attraction doesn't grow from negotiation. Men who maintain attraction understand this quietly. They don't announce boundaries. They live them. They don't disappear, but they don't orbit either. They listen, they care, and they remain solid in who they are. That balance is rare, and that's exactly why it matters. Being helpful isn't the problem. Being helpful at the cost of your self-respect is. And once you see that difference, everything changes. 4. When listening turns you into the safe option. Let's slow this down for a moment, because this part requires honesty and a little self-awareness. Not aggression, not shame. Just a calm look in the mirror. A lot of men believe that if they listen long enough, care deeply enough, and stay patient enough, things will eventually shift in their favor. That belief is comfortable, and it's also where many men get stuck. Listening by itself does not move things forward, and when listening becomes the only role you play, you don't become attractive. You become familiar. Here's the quiet criticism most men need to hear. If all you ever do is absorb her emotions without expressing your own direction, you train her to see you as emotionally useful, not emotionally compelling. That's not an insult, it's feedback. Being the safe option doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly, when you're always available, always agreeable, and never anchored in your own perspective. When you listen, but never lead. When you support, but never challenge. And before you realize it, you're the person she vents to, while feeling drawn to someone else. This is where many men misunderstand what emotional strength actually looks like. Strength isn't endless patience. Strength isn't silent endurance. Strength is presence with direction. If you never bring your own energy into the interaction, your opinions, your standards, your rhythm, then the connection stays flat, comfortable, yes, but flat. Here's the wake-up call, and I'm saying this calmly on purpose. If you're listening in hopes that she'll eventually choose you, you've already given up leverage. Because attraction doesn't grow from waiting. It grows from self-respect and clarity. This doesn't mean you interrupt her or dominate the conversation. It means you stop disappearing inside her emotional world. You don't abandon your frame to be liked. When a woman feels that you're solid in who you are, that you're not trying to earn approval, she responds differently. Respect enters the room, and respect always comes before attraction. So here's the advice most men need to hear but rarely get. Stop measuring your value by how much emotional weight you can carry for her. You don't need to prove you're safe. You need to show you're grounded. That means having a life you return to after the conversation. That means not needing her emotional validation to feel steady. That means being able to listen and still remain centered in yourself. When you do that, listening stops turning you into the safe option and starts making you someone she feels drawn toward. Not because you tried harder, but because you finally stood still. 5. How your reaction determines whether respect grows or disappears. Let's bring everything together, because this is where it all actually matters. Not what she says, not how emotional the moment is, but how you respond when it happens. When a woman tells you her problems, she's watching something closely, and most men miss this. She's not analyzing your words as much as she's observing your state, your tone, your calm, your emotional posture, and this is where respect is either built or quietly lost. If you become reactive, rushed, overly emotional, or eager to please, you communicate instability. Not intentionally, but clearly. It tells her that her emotions control the room and by extension, control you. On the other hand, if you stay present without being absorbed, something different happens. You don't rush to fix, you don't dismiss, you don't overinvest, you stay steady. That steadiness is what signals strength. Not loud confidence, not dominance, just calm self-control. Here's the controversial part most men need to hear. Respect doesn't come from how much you care. It comes from how well you manage yourself while you care. A man who loses his center to be liked loses respect. A man who keeps his center while listening gains it. This is why reactions matter more than intentions. You can mean well and still come across as unsure. You can care deeply and still weaken the dynamic. And none of that requires bad behavior. It only requires emotional imbalance. When you respond from a grounded place, you subtly lead the interaction. You don't steer it aggressively. You don't force outcomes. You simply remain unshaken. That creates contrast. Her emotions move, you remain steady. That contrast communicates emotional maturity without a single explanation. And here's something important. This doesn't mean you become distant or detached. It means you're not dependent on the outcome of the conversation. You're not trying to secure approval or closeness in that moment. You're just present. Men who understand this don't leave conversations confused. They don't replay every word in their head. They don't wonder where they stand. Because they weren't trying to get something. They were simply showing who they are. And that's what earns respect. If there's one thing to take from this entire discussion, it's this. Your reaction teaches her how to see you. Not your effort, not your availability, your emotional control. When you respond with calm confidence, respect grows. When you react with neediness or urgency, respect fades. It's that simple and that difficult. So the next time a woman tells you her problems, don't focus on the meaning. Focus on your response. Because in that moment, you're not being tested on what you say. You're being evaluated on who you are. I'm going to end this with a statement that will make some men uncomfortable, and that's exactly why it matters. If a woman is constantly telling you her problems and nothing is moving forward, it's not because you're too nice. It's because you've stopped being someone she can respect. That's not an attack. It's a wake-up call. Respect doesn't disappear because you listened. It disappears when listening turns into self-abandonment, when you put her emotions above your boundaries, when you stay in conversations hoping they'll turn into something more, instead of being honest with yourself about where you stand. Here's the part most men don't want to accept. Women don't lose attraction to men who care. They lose attraction to men who lose themselves while caring. And if this video made you feel seen, if you recognized yourself in any of these moments, that's not failure, that's awareness. Awareness is where change starts. You don't need to talk less. You don't need to care less. You don't need to become cold, distant, or detached. You need to become centered. When you're grounded in who you are, conversations stop feeling confusing. You stop overanalyzing. You stop waiting for signs. You stop hoping emotional closeness will turn into something else on its own. And that's when respect either rises or the truth becomes clear. Now I want to hear from you. If you've ever been the guy she vented to, if you've ever felt close but not chosen, or if you've ever wondered what her sharing really meant, drop your experience in the comments, be honest. I read them and I reach out. Because this isn't just a video. It's a conversation men rarely get to have out loud. You're not alone in this, but it's time to stop being confused and start being clear.